What is up, my Shadowverse soldiers, and welcome back to another Shadowverse Evolved video. Alright soldiers, in today's video we're going to be going over a Havencraft deck breakdown. So this deck personally is very manipulative, I will say. I am very excited to talk about it. It's going to have a lot of moving pieces, and you need to have a lot of deck knowledge and a lot of thinking power to really outplay your opponent when playing this deck. But of course, I don't want to ramble on and, make everybody's heads hurt at the beginning of the video. So personally, I do want to say that I do like when they have these crossover sets, just because if there are new players coming into Shadowverse Evolve, I think this is a good time for new players to get into the game that haven't played Shadowverse Evolve before. Or if you've been playing Vanguard and you get into it as well, it's not really bad to, dip your toes into a crossover set. There's not a huge commitment because there's not going to be any more, support for these cards going into the future sets. We're going to be going back to regular Shadowverse Evolve timeline, and we'll be focusing on Shadowverse regularly. But yeah, for today's video, I'm really excited to talk about it, but let's go ahead and get into it. Alright, and said deck for this video is Oracle Think Tank, or OTT as other people will call it in name. And this is kind of the deck that's really going to use a lot of deck manipulation. So you're going to be looking at top X, and you're going to be rearranging those top X cards either to the bottom of your deck or the top of your deck. And you're really going to be trying to hit the cards that you want to see on the top, and of course, putting things into the bottom that you're not really excited to draw into. But you're really going to want to hit triggers in the right time, so you have to make sure you put them in the right spots, or you'll really mess up your whole entire game plan by putting the wrong card in the wrong spot, and then you end up losing. Alright, so before we get into a huge breakdown, let's talk about the pros and cons for the deck. So starting off with the pros, so we have good removal, trigger setups, and deck knowledge, and then on the con side, we have damage output, constant setup, and then not much draw. Alright, so starting off with our first pro, we have good removal. So what Havencraft deck does not have good removal? That's really the question that I have to ask everybody. So most of the time, Havencraft is going to be the control deck. I think it is the queen / king of all just like removal that is just one thing. Now, is Haven always relevant in meta? No, that's not true. But it just has the best removal in the game, and it can get around, certain keywords, aura, and sometimes just by being able to remove the entire field, and it just doesn't matter what happens. It's just Havencraft will always have good removal, so it's good that Oracle Think Tank has good removal as well. And of course, as we were talking about earlier, you're going to be doing a lot of deck manipulation and deck knowledge. So you're going to be doing a lot of trigger setup. So it's not going to be random if you hit your triggers, as long as you're playing the deck correctly and you manage to see those triggers on the top X cards and you can put them in the right area. When you do go to do your drive checks, you will be hitting those triggers. All right, and lastly on the pro side, we have deck knowledge. So knowledge is power, always remember that. So of course we have our hand, that's a secret area, and our opponent can't look at it unless a card, skill, or anything specifies that they're able to look into your hand, and then it is no longer a secret area. But most of the time your opponent cannot look into your deck, so you will be able to look at the top 4 or top X, don't want to just say any number because of course the cards will vary. But being able to look at top X as your secondary secret area is just giving you so much knowledge and information, because not all the time are you going to be looking at top X to just throw all those cards into the bottom. Those are cards you might need in certain situations. Being able to manipulate that and getting rid of the cards you don't need and keeping those ones you do need on the top is just very good. Alrighty, moving over, we have the cons. So we have damage output. So this deck does not swing for a lot. Of course, in the last video, we talked about how the followers weren't really that big, but they were able to do a lot of storm damage. Well, our followers are kind of average, but they're not able to do a lot of damage. They're not going to swing for a whole bunch of storm damage. Of course, you're going to be doing trigger setups and whatnot to get that extra +2 attack for critical triggers. But honestly, the damage output for the deck is very lacking. Alrighty, and next up we have constant setup. So of course, if we're going to be playing a bit of a control deck, we're not going to be playing low to the ground. We're going to really be setting up our game plan, and that's literally what you're doing the entire game. So you're setting up your game plan, setting up the top couple cards of your deck, but you do have to remind yourself that when you see these cards, you're only going to be drawing maybe 1 or 2 cards a turn. So unless you find a way to draw a whole bunch of cards and being able to see those cards, then you're just definitely going to be constantly setting up this top X of your cards, setting up a board which you're probably only going to be able to put at least maybe a max of 3 followers on the board at the same time. So there's always a constant setup, and then if your opponent's doing their game plan, and if their game plan just like out resources you a whole lot crazier, then you're in like a very sticky situation. And then lastly, of course, with the constant setup, there is not much draw on the deck. So it's one thing to be looking at top X cards, but if we're not drawing into a whole bunch of those cards very quickly, or, you know, if I manage to hit these triggers and whatnot, and then I don't know what's coming next, or I manage to hit these triggers and I look at the top X and I'm not even able to draw the card that I know is on the top of my deck that can get me out of the situation, I'm just like, okay, then what was the point of me even doing that? Alright, so here are the big cheeses of the deck, or like just the big head honchos that you need to be looking out for. So the first card we will be looking at is Goddess of the Half Moon, Tsukiyomi. So she's a 2-cost 2/3. You can look at the top 3 and put any number of them to the top of your deck in any order, and then the rest at the bottom of your deck in any order. But you can also spend 1 play point to engage her, to select an enemy follower in the field and then reveal the top card of your deck, and deal damage to it equal to the cost of the selected follower. If you reveal the Goddess of the Full Moon, Tsukiyomi, you can add it to your hand. So of course, if we can go ahead and peek over and look at the Goddess of the Full Moon, Tsukiyomi here, she's a 5-cost 4/4, she has Ward and Twin Drive, so she's able to drive check twice. So while there's a Goddess of the Half Moon Tsukiyomi and a Goddess of the Crescent Moon Tsukiyomi into your cemetery, this follower has Storm. But when she comes into play, you may summon an Oracle Think Tank follower that costs 4 or less from your hand. Alright, so taking a little halt here before we get into Amaterasu. So being able to play Goddess of the Half Moon and being able to look at the top 3. If you have 3 play points and you manage to get a 5-cost follower on the top, that being the Full Moon Tsukiyomi, you're able to just go ahead and spend 1 in the engager and deal 5 damage to something, which is just amazing. But of course, on top of that, we also have the Full Moon, which is going to have Storm as long as we have the Half Moon and the Crescent Moon into our cemetery, having ourselves some 4 damage and being able to swing that very same turn to get those 2 drive checks. Of course, as we're manipulating through our deck, as we saw with the Half Moon, if we're able to play both of those things at the same turn, we're able to go ahead and hit some triggers if we're able to. Or if you are very unlucky, which sometimes does happen, you manage to just put all 3 to the bottom, and then, you know, you try your best to hit a drive check, and then sometimes you might not hit it. But of course, you know, that's just the RNG factor of these games. Alrighty, and the next up we have CEO Amaterasu. So she's a 4-cost 4/4. She has a Sail and Twin Drive, so she drive checks twice. But when she comes into play, you look at the top 2 cards of your deck, you put any number of them on the top of your deck in any order, and then you put the rest on the bottom in any order. So it does feel kind of bad that Amaterasu on the unevolved side doesn't have Rush, so she's able to proc the Twin Drive as soon as she's played on 4, but you optimally do want to evolve her for 2 because her evolved effects are very nice. And of course, we will get into Amaterasu later on in the video. I promise to you we will talk about it, but let's start talking about the starting amulets. So of course, you always have the option of running the Dragoncraft and the Swordcraft starter deck cards that'll give any Vanguard follower the +1/+1. But I highly recommend that you look towards the Godhawk Ikabayoshi, the 2-cost amulet that's for Oracle Think Tank, just because it's able to bury itself as long as you have another Oracle Think Tank follower on field, and being able to look at the top 3. Alright, so these are all the triggers for the deck. So of course you're going to want to rearrange these as perfectly as you can, just so you can hit them when you go for your drive checks. But I do want to say that sometimes there are situations where you want to play one of them. And said trigger that I was talking about was the critical trigger Oracle Guardian Nikki. So this is a 4-cost 4/4. She has Rush and a Sail. But whenever you drive check a trigger, you give this follower Storm. Alright, so how the combo works is that you go for the Full Moon Tsukiyomi, and then you play the Oracle Guardian Nike from your hand. And then we go to drive check, of course, with the Twin Drive from the Full Moon Tsukiyomi. You can make sure that you have a drive check on the top 2. Hopefully you're able to hit another Oracle Guardian so you can swing in for a total of 10 damage that turn, because the Oracle Guardian will get that Storm that turn as long as you drive check a trigger. So being able to swing in for 8 damage is very good. Alright, so in this deck, you will be searching as early as turn 1. So as long as you have Goddess of the Crescent Moon Tsukiyomi in your hand as early as turn 1, I do not see the pain and or the hate and not playing this on turn 1, because obviously you're going to need this card into your cemetery, and her having the ability to go ahead and look at the top card, and it being a half moon Tsukiyomi and adding it straight to your hand to go ahead and replace her, it's just very good. Alright, so one thing I will know about Havencraft is that their games go very long. So, of course, if we're going to be playing the long game and we're going to be removing our opponent's cards, and we're going to be hitting triggers that'll be drawing cards and then restanding our followers, we need a way to get those cards back. So we have these lovely cards that are going to be able to recycle our drive check triggers from our cemetery. So looking at our first card, we have Oracle Guardian Wiseman. So he's a 2-cost 2/3. When he comes into play, select up to 1 card in your cemetery and put it into your deck third from the top. And once on each of your turn, when you drive check a trigger, you deal 2 damage to each enemy leader and then give your leader +2 defense. So a very good card to go ahead and heal 2 and then deal 2 to the leader to get some extra damage in, and being able to recycle at least 1 trigger from your cemetery. And then we have White Hair of Vinyaba, so it's a 1-cost 1/1 that also you can ride for 1. And on drive, you give this follower +1/+1, you give leader +1 defense, but when it comes into play, select up to 1 card in your cemetery and put it to the third from the top. Alright, so I personally like this card just because it has the variety of uses here, so it can turn into a goblin that'll heal you for 1. But honestly, just having the 1 play point to just going ahead and getting a card from our cemetery, putting it to the third from the top, and then if we draw from any other cards that we might have, and if we do a twin drive, drive check, then we'll be able to hit one of those triggers. Alrighty, and the next up we have Luckbird. So I think this is a card that should go into a lot of decks just because of its second ability. But in this first ability, of course, it's going to be for Oracle Think Tank by being able to look at the top 3, then rearranging it from the top and bottom of your choice. But this second ability of selecting 5 followers with triggers in your cemetery and returning them to your deck, you shuffle your deck, draw a card, and then recover 1 play point. It's just very good. Alrighty, and lastly we have Silent Tom. So it's a 3-cost 3/3 with single drive, but when it's played, you select 1 card in your cemetery and put it into the third from the top of your deck. So all these cards are going to do what they need to do. So of course, in certain situations, you're going to probably want to go for Oracle Guardian, just so when you hit a drive check, you can, deal 2 and then draw 2. But of course, there's going to be the removal aspect for Silent Tom when we get into that. Alright, and speaking of removal, here are all the removal pieces that you need to be watching out for or using in the Oracle Think Tank deck. And of course, if we're playing Havencraft, the one thing we're going to be enjoying the most is having just hard spot-on removal. So there's not going to be a lot of things that deal X damage. There's probably going to be a mixture of cards that, of course, that are going to be like, hey, deal 2 damage, deal 4 damage, versus the things that say, hey, if this card's on the field, it's gone. Alright, so looking at our first card, we have Battle Maiden Tajutsu Hime. So she's a 2-cost 2/2. You can ride her for 1, but on drive, you select 1 enemy follower on the field and deal it 2 damage. You give this follower +1/+1. And when she comes into play, look at the top 2 cards of your deck, put any number of them to the top of your deck in any order, and then the rest to the bottom. Let me tell you that try saying her name 10 times as fast, by the way, because I was like falling and tripping over saying that, by the way. But having a 3/3 that's able to deal 2 damage is something, so if you want to take care of 2 followers, this is very good. Or if there's one big 5/5 on the field, you're able to just go ahead and just, sink everything into it, while also being able to peek into your deck and looking at the top 2. Whatever needs to stay on the top stays on the top, and whatever needs to go to the bottom can go right there. And then next up we have the Silent Tom Evo. So Silent Tom turns into a 4/4 and it still has single drive, but on evolve you discard an Oracle Think Tank card and then you select the enemy follower on the field with 5 defense or less on the field and banish it. Alright, so personally I like removals like this just because if there's a huge follower on the field and we don't have the ways of just saying, hey, hard remove that, and we need to play a numbers game, sometimes you have to play the numbers game to get it down to whatever defense you might need, and then do cards like Silent Tom to go ahead and banish it and not worrying about anything that it has to do on this gameplay because it is banished and it's not coming back. Alrighty, next up we have Battle Sister Cocoa. So she's a 4-cost 3/3. You can ride her for 1, but on drive you give this follower +1/+1. Look at the top 5 cards of your deck, put any number of them on the top of your deck in any order, and then the rest of the bottom in any order. And whenever you drive check a trigger, you select the enemy follower on the field and deal it 4 damage to give your leader +2 health. So I will say that this card is honestly the skeleton of the deck in a way, just because it's able to look at the top 5. So you get to really look. I think this card looks at the most, honestly. Being able to look at the top 5, and then being able to rearrange the trash cards to the bottom and those triggers in any way that you need to. I think whenever you play this card, this is when you start getting into those big brain plays, because we have a lot of choices to choose from, and you have to make sure you think correctly when putting those cards to the bottom and putting them to the top. And of course, last but not least, we have CEO Amaterasu, which turns it to a 6/6 and still has a sail in twin drive, so she does drive check twice still. But whenever you drive check a trigger, you can choose one. You can select an enemy following the field and banish it, or you can draw a card. Alright, so there are these lovely interactions with CEO Amaterasu, which makes me smile because you gotta love interactions when playing these card games like this. So of course, when you hit those drive check triggers, you can choose between the two abilities. If you choose one when you're swinging into the follower, you automatically fizzle the fight just because there's no follower to be swung at. And then if you manage to hit another trigger, you can go ahead and do the second one, or you can do one again to get another follower off the field, which is pretty cool too. So if you're able to stack very correctly, you can either draw 2 cards or get rid of 2 followers off the field, or get a follower off the field and draw a card. And speaking of drawing cards, let's talk about the cards that'll be adding cards to our hand from this deck. Alright, so looking at our first card, we have Dark Cat. So it's a 2-cost 2/2. You can ride this follower for 1, but on drive, you give this follower +1/+1. Look at the top 3 cards of your deck. You may reveal an Oracle Think Tank follower from among them and add it to your hand, and put any number of them on the top of your deck in any order, and put the rest in the bottom in any order. So I do believe Dark Cat is a good all-around card, just because it's on the early turns, you can go ahead and keep setting up. You can reveal an Oracle Think Tank card that you might need and add it to your hand for whatever your later play lines might be. And then also this card having the drive point here and being able to use the single drive to being able to hit a trigger that you might have already seen from the top 3. And then next up, we have Evil Eye Princess Urael. So it's a 2-cost 2/3. It has Rush and Twin Drive, but once on each of your turns when you drive check a trigger, you can draw a card. And mind you, with all the manipulation that we are doing, it is very hard not to see them in the very early turns. And of course, there are situations where you're not going to be seeing that many drive check triggers because we only have X amount of drive check triggers that will work in our deck. But being able to see them in the early game and then using a card like this to go ahead and drawing a card. And mind you, if we hit a draw trigger, then, our hand is looking pretty healthy at that point. But of course, there's the RNG that we might not even see those cards. Alright, and then next up we have Maiden of Libra, so it's a 3-cost 3/3 with Ward. When she comes into play, you look at the top 5 from your deck and you put any number of them on the top and then any number of the bottom. And you can also engage to draw a card. Alright, so another key card that I will say is a very good card in this deck just because you're able to look very deep in the deck. But I'm going to be real, soldiers. If you do not engage this follower to draw a card, I do not know what's wrong with you. If I ever catch anyone playing this card, unless there's a situation where you don't want to draw a card and like potentially deck out, which I don't think are the situations that will come up too often, you will always be engaging this card to draw a card. But anyway, soldiers, cards like this, Maiden of Libra and Sister Coco, are going to be the cards that are vital just because you're going to be looking very deep into your deck, looking at the top 5. And there's going to be a higher chance. I'm not going to say it's going to be every time because, of course, there are the chances that you don't. But there's going to be a high chance that you see those drive check triggers when you look at the top 5. And you just got to make sure to rearrange them when you're going to be hitting these twin drives and single drive cards. Alright, so let's talk about the tech for Oracle Think Tank. Alright, so of course, I think every deck's tech will always be the Angelic Snipe card just because it's the quick spell. And then, of course, with the second ability, you're able to do whatever your deck is supposed to do. But for Oracle Think Tank, you're going to be discarding an Oracle Think Tank card to deal 3 damage to something, and then look at the top 2 cards of your deck, and then rearrange them to the top or bottom in any order. But I will say the good spice, or some real good spice, is the Blue Storm Dragon Maelstrom, just because it's a 3-cost card that is Storm, and it's going to have the twin drives too. Because I think another thing that this deck has a problem with, like I said in the cons, the damage output. We need more cards with Storm, so we're able to get more damage on the field. So like, if we're able to hit a crit trigger and we do Blue Storm Dragon Maelstrom, then we could turn this follower into a 5/3, which is very good. And of course, lastly, we have Powers Converge, which is the 3-cost spell, which if we are playing the Vanguard deck and we have at least 3 face-up drive point cards in our Evolved deck face-up, we can choose all 3 of the modes, which is going to either deal 4 damage to a follower, select a follower in our cemetery and add it to our hand, or we can give our leader +4 defense. Yeah, I'm gonna be honest, soldiers, I think this was everything that I could find for Oracle Think Tank. If there's some more spice that I am missing, please let me know in the comments below, because I want everyone to have the greatest amount of access in terms of knowledge for this deck. Because I'm going to be honest, I just learned about this deck this past week/weekend, so I'm glad we're able to all go over this and figure out this stuff at the same time. But if there's more spice out there, please let everybody know so we can have a nice good hub here for Shadowverse Evolved. Alrighty, so we're getting into the grade of the deck. So I'm not going to lie to you, soldiers. I had a very hard time grading this deck. There's a lot of moving pieces that go along with this deck, and there's lots of potential. So like, it's kind of like what I was saying for Aqua Force in terms of if the deck hits gas, it really works. But like, it's not as glass cannony. Like, you're able to just peek into your deck and see the cards that you need, but you're not drawing them. That's the sad part. It's like it's one thing to know that you're going to be looking at your cards, and I think looking at your cards and then losing after you look at your cards because, sometimes you just needed one more turn before you start doing, drive checks, twin drives, and single drives and stuff like that. I don't know. Like, just don't have torches and pitchforks at my head coming at me for the grade for this deck because I think there's a lot of potential. I didn't want to glaze it too much, honestly, but I think I'm going to try my best to give this deck a fair grade. But of course, before we get into the grading and stuff of it, we're going to look at a couple sample deck lists of Oracle Think Tank. Alright, so here is the sample deck list that is provided on the recommended that is on the website. I say highly check this deck out, honestly, just because it's so good. I think it's a good way to start, of course, without all the tech cards in it. It's just the basic, put 3 of everything in it, and then, of course, the one of Lucky Bird that I see that they have in here. So if you really want to copy and paste this deck list, I would highly recommend it just so you could learn how to play it and then, rearrange the ratios how you see fit. Alright, so here is my personal deck list. So I wanted to have a little bit of flavor of everything just because we're not going to be able to use everything in the deck. And of course, let's be serious. There are going to be situations where we draw our triggers and we want to make the most out of everything. So I went ahead and splashed a little bit of everything in the deck. Of course, you can remove the ratios or up the ratios for the cards you do like and enjoy using in certain matchups and stuff like that. But this is my personal brew. Of course, I will include the deck code in the description below if you want to check it out personally. So if you manage building the deck, let me know how it goes. I think this is a pretty good, decent deck list here. Of course, it has a mixture of everything, but we're not going to go everything one for one. I included the Maelstrom Dragon just because we needed the extra damage, and of course if we managed to hit the crit trigger and whatnot and turning this into a 5 damage is something I just couldn't pass up personally. Alright, so getting back into the grade of the deck. So what we have learned so far from Oracle Think Tank that it's going to be peeking into our deck and looking at X amount of cards. It has some pretty good storm damage if we manage to hit the crit trigger and have the Full Moon Tsukiyomi on the field at the same time, of course, with the Full Moon Tsukiyomi's fanfare by at least putting out at least 8 damage as long as we hit that drive check trigger. And of course, if we hit the crit trigger on top of the crit trigger we've already played, which is kind of a big ass too, we can swing for a total of 10 damage in one turn as long as there's no interaction from our opponent. But mind you, that is a big play with multiple moving pieces and everything has to line up perfectly, and you know how everything having to line up perfectly in every game is going to go. Nobody is perfect, and I don't think any of our decks are perfect at all, and that's why we always have these competitions to see how close our deck can be to being very consistent. And that's another thing I'd like to talk about decks, is that they need to be very consistent if they're going to be very high up on the list. So being able to consistently look at your deck is something that the deck does have going for it. So I do want to give this deck an A. I want to give this deck an A. Now, in terms of output of damage of closing games, I really do want to lean on the B side of like the damage and everything. But all around, I think I'd give this deck a solid A. It's not bad to play. If you really want to play into the Havencraft like build after you've played the Shadowverse Evolve and Vanguard crossover set, I think this is like a good way to get into the entry of Havencraft. And if you really enjoy Havencraft, you're really going to enjoy Oracle Think Tank, and vice versa if you like in Oracle Think Tank. Of course, there aren't that many decks out there in actual Havencraft that are kind of like Oracle Think Tank, but of course, look at that. Oracle Think Tank is in the Haven class. Just play Oracle Think Tank. And alright, soldiers, that is it for the Oracle Think Tank breakdown. Thank you so much for watching. It means a lot to me. We're almost done with all these breakdowns. Man, of course we have Shadow Paladins tomorrow. I need to figure out a time that you guys should be expecting these videos because I kind of have them all over the place. Like whenever I get to recording them and then get to finishing them, I just kind of post them. But if you guys have like an optimal time for me to release these, I can go ahead and get them done before a certain time. And we can have them on the dot every time, because I know a couple of people have reached out to me and said, hey, You know, I enjoy watching your videos while I'm at work and stuff like that. And of course, these videos can roll over into the next day and you can watch them the next day if you just want to wait and stuff like that. But enough of me rambling. I am tired of taking up your time. Thank you guys so much for watching. It means a lot to me that you watch. I love all of you. Make sure you are safe in whatever you do tonight and safe whatever you do for the rest of the year. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.
Yeah. TRINN. Just to get you away. What I got to do, what I got to do.